happy Sunday to you. It is 6 o'clock, which means that it is time for the family hour. That's right. We are back on the air. My name is Sean Marshall. I am one of the pastors serving on staff here at the greatest church in the whole wide world, Salem Baptist Church of Chicago. Our pastor is Reverend James T. Meeks. We are grateful to God for how the Lord has kept us throughout this pandemic. So excited to see you all tonight, and I want to encourage you to do several things as you come in. First of all, hit the like and share button. Let somebody know that we are on, that we're having a conversation tonight. This is going to be another good one. You don't want to miss it. You want to let other people know what we are talking about tonight. Secondly, I want to ask you to comment and let us know where you are watching from. We would love to know that our Salem family is engaging with us tonight from right here in the Chicagoland area, as well as around the world, because Salem is open to the world. So if you're watching from Atlanta, if you're watching from Houston, if you're watching from Phoenix, if you're watching from somewhere in Michigan, drop a comment, let us know that you have tuned in tonight. Thirdly, we want you to engage this conversation with your comments and with your questions. It is our prayer and hope that you would always leave these conversations with something that can help you as you go through this pandemic, as we begin to reemerge. Can you believe we've been in this thing for a year, almost a year and a half? There is some light at the end of the tunnel, but we want to make sure that we are doing everything we can to give good information, to provide clarity, so that you can have confidence in the decisions that you make with your family. Our mission as a church is to restore hope by connecting people to God and to each other. So we want you to leave here with a little bit more hope than you came in with tonight. All right. I'm going to pray for us, and then I'm going to bring on our panel for tonight. Father, thank you for the Salem Baptist Church of Chicago and for your great favor toward us. Thank you for our pastor and his leadership, for how he has listened to you, heard you, obeyed you, and allowed us to not only be safe in the midst of this pandemic, but continue to worship, continue to grow, continue to strengthen our families. We're so grateful for how you have kept the Salem Baptist Church of Chicago, for how you've kept us no matter where we might be watching from tonight. We realize that there may be friends and family from other churches, and God, no matter where we're hailing from tonight, we know that you have been good. Not only have you kept us safe from dangers seen and unseen, you've comforted us in the midst of loss and crisis and change. So first of all, Lord, thank you. Now, God, we ask that you would be present with us, that we would know, have a deep awareness of your presence in the conversation tonight. Lord, you know what we're talking about. We want to be able to hear some things, share some things that we know came through us straight from heaven. So may it be so tonight for your glory, in Jesus' name. Amen. I am excited. Tonight we are talking about reemerging from the pandemic. Okay. We're hearing some things from the CDC. We're getting new information. Some of us are starting to travel again, feeling a little bit more safe. I seen you. Some of you all are inching within 6 feet. You're kind of like 3 feet and 2 feet. I saw somebody a couple of weeks ago that had a t-shirt on that said, "Hug me, I'm vaccinated." Right. So we're getting a little bit more confident, a little bit more courageous as we near what we think to be the end of this thing. But we wanted to bring some folk on to help us have some thoughtful and prayerful discussion, again, so that we can make good decisions and make sure that we're leading our family in healthy and hopeful ways. So first, I want to bring on my longtime friend, just a really wise young person. And she is leading in the area of science. And also, we had her on a couple of weeks ago talking about bioethics. She is a brilliant, brilliant leader, and I'm glad to have her back on tonight. I want to welcome Dr. Ariangela Kozik back to the family hour. Hey, Dr. Ari, good to see you.
Hi, thanks for having me back.
Welcome back, and I am so grateful for you and you making the time to be here with us. It's 6 o'clock on a Sunday evening where we are. It's 7 o'clock on a Sunday evening. And so we know that the time difference, because you are at University of Michigan in the Ann Arbor area, And so we're just grateful. I know what that's like when you have a toddler and you're trying to get them ready and do all the nighttime preparation stuff. So thank you again for making time for this tonight. I also want to welcome on this side of the camera another young, brilliant leader. She is so faithful, serves our church in so many different ways. Is on our staff team. She helps make outreach projects happen. She helps in our Hope Center Foundation. She's often working behind the scenes, engaging you all in the comments section with the family hour. She's also an entrepreneur and just one of the smartest young people I've ever known. Welcome on this side of the camera, Traylon Pullen. We got you back, Trey. How you doing tonight?
Wow, thank you. I'm doing great. It's great to be on the camera instead of in the comments today. So
that's right. So we're glad to have you and looking forward to your voice in this conversation. Also grateful because, you know, we got somebody who's going to be on tonight. We were able to pull him off of his busy preaching schedule. I know that he was on the docket to preach somewhere with Bishop Jakes, and he's probably lecturing at some conferences after this. He's my longtime friend, longtime brother. He is the pastor of Compassion Baptist Church, son of Salem, dropped a great word on us here at Salem this past Wednesday, and he made time to be on with us tonight. I want to welcome Pastor Watson Jones to the Family Hour. Reverend, how you feeling, sir?
Sean, you're hilarious. It's good to be here, man. I'm glad to be here and good to see everyone. And thank you for having me on, my brother.
Man, see, I mess with people that I know like that. So I didn't forewarn you. So
you disappointed everyone, by the way.
No, shut up. Whatever. He's talking about disappointing everyone. He's going to drop some theological, ideological, philosophical, sociological bombs and then be like, well, you know, but the Lord just, I don't know. So we're going to have a good conversation tonight. All right. So we are ready to roll. So I want to start with Dr. Ari. Okay. Black microbiologist. Has studied disease pathology, knows words that I can't pronounce. Okay. We had you on a few weeks ago. We were talking about vaccines, and the issue again was bioethics. So that whole area of, you know, is it right for us to be thinking and doing certain things when it comes to health, when it comes to medicine? So since you were on, several things have changed, and listen, in the comments, please give God praise for a Black microbiologist, okay? I don't know if y'all know how awesome this is. Representation matters. Being able to pull a sister to the side and say, okay, look, you know, Fauci and them cool and everything like that, but okay, but for real though, you know? So, Dr. Ari, since we last talked, we heard from the CDC that if you are fully vaccinated, you don't have to wear masks anymore. That's what we heard. President said it. CDC said it. And listen, I was in the store yesterday, and it was funny because, Trey, I don't know if you've seen this too. Seemed like as soon as they said that, now I saw not only customers, I saw employees in the store with no mask on because the CDC said, if you're fully vaccinated. Dr. Ari, I would love to know what you might say to us about this new information. How should we hold the information? Well, first of all, why do you believe this information has been shared with us? How should we responsibly hold this? Okay, because there are a lot of people who've been wearing masks for 15 months now. And so, you know, sneezing on their face and stuff, and, you know, having a chance to smell their own breath. And so they're ready to take their masks off. But just what would you say to us about this?
Right. So this is a really good question. And personally, I know that that announcement sent quite a ripple through communities of physicians and scientists and public health experts and everything. And there's been a lot of debate over how this guidance was handed down. So the kind of story behind this is that we have enough scientific evidence to be able to confidently say that people who are fully vaccinated against COVID-19, and so that means you are 2 weeks or more past your second dose of either Pfizer or Moderna, or 2 weeks past your one dose of Johnson & Johnson, that it is, those individuals are allowed to feel confident that they can go about their lives and not wear masks and be protected from contracting symptomatic or severe COVID-19. So that much is true. The data has fortunately shown that the vaccines are doing a really good job at keeping transmission down, protecting people from hospitalization and death, and in most cases from symptomatic COVID if they're exposed to it. So like all of that in itself is true. The issue though is that this guidance comes with like a lot of required nuance, that a lot of things that we have to hold at the same time. So yes, like it is, if you have been fully vaccinated, it is safer for you, like it's safe for you to go about your business and not have a mask on. However, that guidance is only for fully vaccinated individuals. The problem with that is that's best case scenario. Of course, people will decide, oh, I'm fully vaccinated, so that means I will not wear a mask. So if you see someone that's not wearing a mask, you can assume that they're fully vaccinated. But I know just from my experience here where I live that we are in an area where there's been low mask adherence and low vaccine uptake up to this point. And so we know, even though the guidance is that fully vaccinated people can go without their masks, we know that more than likely there will be people who have decided to continue not wearing a mask, who are not fully vaccinated, who remain a risk. Thankfully, because of vaccination, the risk is more concentrated within themselves and other unvaccinated people that may be around in the area. But my issue with that is the population of unvaccinated people right now includes children. So both adolescents who are eligible now but may not have had the opportunity to get the vaccine, because I believe the guidance was handed down like the next day after we got the EUA for 12 to 15-year-olds. So there had not been a lot of time for adolescents to be vaccinated. And then for any child under 12, they're not eligible for vaccination yet. So there are a lot of concerns about like how this, although the science is there that fully vaccinated people will be safe, my concern is that for unvaccinated individuals, like they still need to be very careful because the pandemic is still very much going on. I mean, yes, things are on the decline here in the United States, but there are still people, being sick, being hospitalized, and dying from COVID-19. I feel like we really, because it's been so bad, like our threshold for tragic or like tragedy has been like reset in a really unfortunate way, so that yes, things are better than they were, but like it's still not, like the pandemic is not over. And so it's kind of hard to hold those things at the same time, I know, but that's something that we really, really, really need to work at our messaging and, getting those things out to communities so that they, like, yes, even if you're fully vaccinated, like that's fine, like for you, but there are people around you who are not vaccinated, either because they cannot be yet or because they have chosen not to be. And as the pandemic is still going on and we are still having like emerging variants circulating, like it's not the time to be like, okay, well, I can take my mask off. It's okay. I don't need to worry about who is masked or not masked. And so I know in areas near me, there are employers or businesses that have been like, well, we don't know how to enforce this rule. Yes, the CDC guidance says you have to be fully vaccinated to go without a mask, but like who's the employee that gets to say, stand at the door and be like, are you vaccinated? Are you vaccinated? Those are the kind of things that have caused contention and conflict. So it's something that's very hard to enforce and uphold, which like ultimately puts people who are not vaccinated at more risk. And since that group includes children right now, I think it's really important for us to think carefully about the decisions we make around masking, despite the guidance that's been handed down.
Yeah, that's so very good. And I mentioned earlier that I was in the grocery store yesterday, and I saw folks shopping. And this is a non-scientific statement. Okay, this is not based in research. But there were some people walking around the store without their mask on, and I looked at them and I said, "They ain't been vaccinated." Okay, this is not. It was not based on any evidence. That was not an evidence-based conclusion. Okay,
Pure bias.
Yes, there was research bias in my conclusion. Okay, I'm not going to get into the depth of that, but it's just like there ain't nothing that's about you that says vaccinated. And my thing is, when you get this guidance, right? How do we know that people aren't just saying, "I've been vaccinated"? We got these cards that people have been going to, Office Max to Xerox, right? And I don't think we really thought that through about how we would actually verify that people have actually been vaccinated and how we would. So you addressed all of the points and thoughts that I had. And what saddens me about that is it's just not seeming to sink in that the whole thing of mask wearing was not about necessarily protection for the person wearing the mask as much as it was being careful to love others well and to be protective of your neighbor, right? So when I put on a mask, what I've heard is that, and you can tell me if this is true, I wear a mask, you have COVID, my chances of being protected from COVID are not as high as if the situation was reversed and you were the person with COVID wearing the mask and I was unmasked. So masks protect others principally, right? So it just kind of breaks my heart that we're in that place. So Traylon, I happen to, and so you are a young adult leader here. We have at the House of Hope, we've been able to partner with different organizations, and we've been able to vaccinate over 4,000 people, help over 4,000 people get vaccinated. You have been instrumental in helping to organize those events, working directly with our outreach teams, putting together the logistics of those events. So, I know that you've been supportive of helping us to get people protected. I would love it if you could just share personally, just when you found out about the vaccine as a young adult, and you had to make a decision. What was your decision, first of all, and what led you to that decision? And then I'll follow that up with a different question. But just talk to us for a second about what led you to your choice concerning the vaccine when it was available.
Sure. So before the vaccine came knocking on my door and they had it at Salem, I was not trying to take the vaccine. I was a part of the fake concern people that was like, I don't know what's in this. I want to wait a year if I get it and let other people test it out. And I was fake concerned. And then when it actually came to Salem and my parents were like, we really kind of want you to get this, I was like, okay, I am going to get it because I actually don't have a bunch of details. I haven't done some major research. And I felt like I was the one in my house that was moving around a lot and I was around my parents. So I wanted to get it to make sure I was keeping them safe. But I cannot lie to you and say I was super, everybody should get the vaccine. I just knew I wanted to get it for my parents in the beginning. So that's where I was with it. Did you have some follow-up questions with that?
I do, and thank you for that because it's funny because and whenever I have the conversation about vaccines, one of the things I point out is the importance of being able to have this conversation non-anxiously, because people have very, very, very strong feelings one way or the other about this, right? So, if people are, pro-vaccine, then they're just like, praying for folk who are not, like, you got a devil on your mind, and oh, come on, God, come on, Jesus, let's rebuke the devil off the mind. And then we have people who are like, I don't want to wear a mask. And, they're like, oh, you people who are wearing masks and getting these vaccines, you're just sheep, you're just deceived. And I'm like, everybody calm down, right? Let's have a conversation and let's get some information, right? Information lowers anxiety. So when we can actually have a Black microbiologist on and actually answer some questions and talk honestly without jumping at each other, that helps all of us. So I really appreciate your honesty in your response. The follow-up question is, talk about, and I know I can share and Red Watson can share, but while we have somebody that I consider to be an expert on, specifically as it relates to a lot of these things, like, protective measures, how the virus works, how the vaccine works. Let's talk a little bit about some of your specific concerns, and even some of the concerns that we continue to hear that keep young adults, actually people who are we're more likely to be super spreaders, right? So, because we're the ones who are moving around, we're the ones that folks have said, you guys are young, your immune systems are great, you're not going to get sick, you're not vulnerable, right? But we're the ones who are going to get it and give it to the vulnerable. And so, talk to us about some of the things that maybe you and others that have kept them from actually moving forward with the vaccine.
Right. So first, let me say, when we were having this discussion, a month ago, and I was listening to you all, even when I got the vaccine, I did not have any friends that were trying to get the vaccine. I was the only one. I was the test dummy. And now I can honestly say a good half of my friends have gotten it. The other half is just lazy. Honestly, it's not about a fear. It's just, I'm gonna get to it when I get to it. But even that initial fear that I had was so fake. That's all I can say. And it's like that for so many people. I cannot tell you. And this is what I said to my friends. I said, I got it because when I got my vaccination in high school, when I had to get that shot in college, I had no clue what I was getting, and I still got it. So I was like, I'm not going to act like I'm concerned now about what's in this vaccine when I have never questioned anything I've gotten from the doctor. I've never read into details about the pills I'm taking. I mean, that's just me being honest. I had to look at it like, am I actually concerned? And a lot of them, it was the same case, and I think for the people that haven't gotten it, like I said, some of my friends just haven't gotten to it yet. And some people are super strong on it. And I think that they're just really, a lot of them say, well, nobody's saying they just absolutely don't want it. What I've seen is y'all the testers, I'm not getting it for another year. Good luck with that. We'll see how it affects you. But I've really seen a shift in my peers as far as before it was I'm not getting it to now it's just, either they have gotten it because they just want to travel, or they plan on getting it later. But as far as genuine concern, I cannot tell you one genuine concern or side effect that I've heard my peers truly have, more than just now everybody's just getting it to travel, or they just haven't gotten to it yet.
That's very helpful. But there was one thing that you mentioned, and because I hear this a lot, one of my good friends who didn't get the vaccine until literally they're not even 2 weeks out from their second shot. They said the exact thing to me because, for whatever the reason, when I first heard about it, I had an immediate peace. And then, like I said, I talked to Dr. Ari and I'm like, oh, that's right. You are really smart. So tell me about this. And I felt great. But one of my friends said to me, this vaccine hasn't been out long enough. It takes 2 to 3 years to develop vaccines. So you the test dummy. And so I want Dr. Ari to specifically comment on that. What should we know? Because that's a real concern people have, right? Some people feel like this was developed too fast. They feel like there's not a lot of research on it. They feel like there's not been enough time to make sure this is safe. What should be the response to that? What should we know? What's the information that helps address that anxiety?
Okay, right. And this is a a really good question. And in all of my talking to different people in different communities about this, this has been one of the big hangups, because there's a real misconceptions about how we got here. I think because people just weren't paying attention until the pandemic happened, and then we started talking about vaccine development. But the entire process to develop this vaccine, it still followed the normally required like safety checks and like regulatory approval processes. Like none of that changed. But there are some key factors that like helped the process move along faster than you might expect, and like as what we have experienced in the past for like other vaccines. So, but before that, I think one of the most important things to recognize is that for the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines, those are what are called mRNA vaccines. And so they are mRNA vaccines are like are designed to be like a platform vaccine, so that we can, rapidly introduce whatever it is that we need our immune systems to be able to protect us against. That technology to develop mRNA platforms for vaccinations they've been under study for decades. Scientists have been working diligently, a lot of times behind the scenes. Like you don't really hear about these things going on in the normal course of, your day to day, because we haven't been in a pandemic and it hasn't really been super relevant to everybody's lives in the general public. But there have been scientists and vaccine developers who have been diligently working on this platform for almost 30 years, trying to figure out how to use mRNA, which is a type of building block that is essential for life and in our bodies that we already have. How do we use that in an advanced technology to be able to design vaccines for emerging threats? The reason why we've been studying this for so long is because we've known that the threat of a pandemic or a respiratory virus, that has been real. There have been people who have devoted their careers to figuring out when the next one might occur, how might it spread, what are we going to have to do, how much time do we have to be able to protect our population. And so like part of that is coming up with ways to fight whatever the potential pathogen is. And so mRNA technology had like a real promise of being able to rapidly, to be a rapid response tool in our toolbox to be able to fight these pandemics. And thankfully for us, that's exactly what happened. And so once we knew the pathogen itself, SARS-CoV-2 is the name of the virus. Once we had that, we were able to get its genetic sequence, because in order to use the mRNA vaccine, we have to like design it around the genetic sequence of whatever it is that we're trying to protect ourselves against. The process to get a genetic sequence from an organism, it used to take months of work, but because of advances in technology, we can now have that in a couple of days, which is really amazing. And so by the time we had isolated the pathogen, we were able to get a genetic sequence and get to work on implementing the specific message from that pathogen and put it into this mRNA vaccine platform, and then start testing. And so even though people have only been aware of it since January or so, there has been a just monumental amount of work by people in vaccine development companies, other microbiologists and immunologists, people at the NIH, who have been working really hard to try to scale up the technology to have it ready for a situation that has actually occurred. So that is what I like to remind people of that when they bring up the question of not knowing, how did we get it so fast? It's not because we just came up with it out of nowhere. But there's lots of work and effort and years behind the development that we actually should be like really excited about, because we've been able to have this technological advance that has and continues to save lives. So that's really great.
My gosh. So I'm so grateful for that answer, for that response. So first of all, mRNA technology has actually been in development for decades, is what you said. That's the first thing. And most of us wouldn't know that, because first time most of us heard about mRNA was a few months ago. I'm just talking about for me, right? Now, the second thing you said is because of advances in technology that these developments have been made. And that made me think about how, am I the oldest person on this? So I am. Praise the Lord. Anyway, I remember Polaroid cameras where you could only take 24 pictures with one roll of film. And I'm old enough to remember that you take the roll of film down to Osco and you leave it in an envelope, and you had to wait like a week, 2 weeks before you get your film back. And that was, 30 years ago. Of course, now we take pictures with our cell phones and it's instant. And nobody says, how you can trust that picture? It just came too fast. I mean, it's just part of just the development of technology, right? So we're not 30 years ago where we were. So part of it is just we're not where we used to be. So that's helpful information. And again, we're not condemning people for wherever they are in their thought process. It's just sometimes that information is helpful as you consider these big decisions that have implications for other people. If you are just tuning into Family Hour, we are talking about reemerging from the pandemic. We're talking about what the CDC is saying versus what we should be thinking about vaccines. What are the things that are keeping us from considering vaccines, and how should we hold and steward the information that we're getting so that we can reemerge from the pandemic in healthy ways, right? So Pastor Watson Jones, you are the pastor, senior pastor at Compassion Baptist Church, actually a church in my old neighborhood. So you leading there, and you were actually, I mentioned earlier that here at Salem, we've been able to help over 4,000 people be vaccinated. You were actually one of the leaders, one of the pastors early on that helped us to connect with partners to begin helping people get vaccinated, particularly starting with seniors. We're ever grateful to you for that, for your leadership in that way. But you pastor a multi-generational church. We heard your passion for making sure that those seniors got vaccinated. Talk to us a little bit as a pastor, also as a young adult, leader. You are dad, you've got some beautiful kids, younger kids, and, talk to us about what led you to the place of saying, you know what, I'm a pastor, I'm a shepherd, I'm a community leader. I think I want to steward my influence to help people have the opportunity to not only take the vaccine, but to learn more about it. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, Sean. So I want to answer it first from the first position I find myself in, and that is a father. My home, Kelly and I are probably the least anti-vaxxer couple, I would say, in the world, maybe. And primarily that's because we have a child with autism, which means that we have had to wrestle against myths that people have believed that vaccines were the cause of autism, and having early on to study and to kind of consider that that's not true, that autism existed by a different name in places and before there were ever vaccines in certain places. So to understand that was a myth that had to be dispelled, it for me gave me a place of comfort. Now, let me caveat my statement, though. Fully aware of history in terms of what medicine did, and how certain medical techniques were perfected on Black people. Fully aware of it. I know about the Tuskegee experiment. In fact, one of my members' father was one of the recipients of that shot that got him syphilis. So fully aware of history, I just didn't come at this thinking that this is some made up thing to eradicate Black people. Number one. I think also too, I was overseas when this pandemic began and saw how places in Asia how serious they were about COVID-19 before our previous president even thought to even start mentioning it in a real way. And I knew this would be a serious thing. And so for me, I felt like there really was no way out of this other than you risk catching COVID-19 and you can play the risk. I mean, even people my age, while we have a better chance of survival, there was Jeremiah, the singer, who was 31 years old, and he contracted the coronavirus and was fighting for his life near death. He was 31. He's 6 years younger than me, and in far better shape than me, but yet he almost died. There have been younger people who have contracted COVID-19 and have died. Many more older, but there have been younger people who have. There are people who have struggled. There was a member of my church who might be around 40, 42, who has struggled with long haul, who has dealt with the long hauler symptoms. I mean, and she has been free from COVID since last maybe April or May. I remember a person who visited our church who I knew from Salem, actually, who caught COVID and was in a coma and in the hospital for 72 days. So for me, the virus was not anything to play with. And I know that there were some on the political spectrum who played with it. There are some who, Christians, pastors who played with it and do and gamble with it. I, for one, did not want to do that. And so I felt like with Black people in Chicago, at first finding out 71% of the deaths last spring were Black people. So I said, man, we're going to kill ourselves if we don't get serious about getting this vaccine. The city will move on, and the state will move on, and the country will move on. And basically the Black community spread across America will be experiencing what India is starting to come out of. And who will care? And so for me, there was no real way out of it, other than to get vaccinated. So, and I wasn't afraid of that. So then also that's two, but three, early on when the trials came out, when the Pfizer was opening up for trials, I was contacted by the Reverend Dr. Bishop Horace Smith at Apostolic, who called me and was like, man, we need to figure out a way to get people, Black people specifically, to get in the trials. And this is what he told me. And this is a doctor. He's not like, I'm a fake doctor. He's a doctor, just like Dr. Ari is. He's a doctor. And he said, the reality is, since the trials have opened up, white people have packed the trials out. So that said something to me. And I don't think that Black people should live our lives doing everything white people do, but that said something to me. If this thing was such a test trial, then the white people must know something we don't know, that for them to fill the roles to the point where medical establishments are having to hold back the numbers to be able to say we need space for minorities, because if we can't test minorities with this, and we know that minorities have certain things that we deal with ourselves, like sickle cell anemia. If we don't test Black people, we have no way of knowing how safe this is. So I tried to register to be in the trial, and they didn't. I never got a call, or maybe I missed it. And so for me, and so I got to probe him. I got to ask the questions that my congregation would ask. How do I know you're not injecting me with the virus? That's the first time I came to hear about the mRNA. And when he explained it to me like I was in third grade, because the medical language will lose us all. When he explained it to me like I was in third grade, Reverend Meeks was actually on that call too. Then I came away and said, okay, this is not what, your cousins and them in the barbershop are saying it's going to be. This is not what your family members at the family reunion are saying it is, or your friends who, as Traylon would say, were fake fearful, that this is actually, legitimate, and you are not getting infected with the virus. And I remember having that little bit of knowledge and being able to literally preach that. So for me then, in order for, and we're grateful that our church and I have a lot of COVID deaths. So for me to say, all right, if we're going to get to some semblance of normalcy, my mother, father, stepfather, stepmother, are all four of them are very close. I mean, they would say they're senior citizens, but they're technically not. But they're like right on the edge of that. And 2 out of 4 of them have pre-existing conditions. I have a grandmother who's still alive, and so for me, it was just very important to see people get vaccinated. And I have made a commitment myself to do everything I can within my power to not preach it more than the gospel, but to do what I can to encourage people to get it, because it's safe, it's effective, and to trifle with this virus, I don't think is wise.
So good. Man, you three are brilliant people. I practiced sounding smart, but y'all are for real smart. Pastor Watson, when we've had this conversation before, and you and I are often in a lot of circles with other white pastors and leaders.
Mhm.
And one of the things that we often, and I've pastored a church, I pastored a church before I came home to Salem. And, you know, one of the things that we often have to explain is that in the seats that we sit in as pastors, there's so much, and how do I put this? Our, it's not just being a good theologian, like the resident theologian chaplain. Our theological and missiological practice, in other words, the way we help people think about God, the way we help people think about the application of scripture, the way we help people live out their faith practically, and the way that we do the mission of the gospel in the world has to address so many other different things because of the context that we lead in, right? So we often have to wear other kinds of hats because we know the history. And so I love that you talked about the history, because that's another concern. You know, I've heard people refer to, how do we know this is not the Tuskegee experiment? There's history. That's valid.
It would be a lot of white people dying if it were. But.
Right. But it's, you know, it's a point to address, right? You're absolutely right. But it's a point to address because that's before us. That's part of the narrative. And
Right.
so we have to consider that when we're, you know, engaging in these conversations. So we often have to go and find people that can be trusted to help us get the information so that we can add that to our sermons, right? You know, it's not just the good Bible stories. We have to help people know how to engage with science. Absolutely. And how to engage with information that's coming out through the CDC, right?
Absolutely.
So that's another reason why I'm grateful. And I'll say it again, representation matters, because to be able to have a Black microbiologist on that we can say, okay, for real though, help us understand this. That's something also to point to, you know, to know that it was a Black researcher, a Black doctor who helped to develop the Moderna vaccine, whose team worked on that. And to find out that that's somebody that Ari has had conversations with. Right. So to know, okay, this is information that I believe can be trusted because we have representatives now at the table when these conversations are happening. Okay. So I so appreciate that. And your perspective and what you bring to this conversation. One of the things that, you know, you touched on was, you mentioned being overseas and seeing how the rest of the world was responding to this before America was, right? And your United States. Dr. I would be interested in hearing you talk a little bit about what your thoughts are on different strains, what your thoughts are on resurgence of the virus. We now see that there are other parts of the world that thought that, you know, they were had this thing under control, and, you know, now they're seeing a resurgence. And I would love to hear you talk about that. And, you know, if there's something else you want to jump in, because we've got a Black microbiologist also. So would love to hear your perspective on that and anything else you want to add to this conversation.
Right. Yeah. So I wanted to touch on the representation piece, because that is really so important. And Black microbiologists are very underrepresented in the United States right now at multiple levels, so both in academic research and also in private industry and federal agencies. And so I am excited that this past year we really had, in the scientific space, we really had a coalition of Black scientists and physicians and care providers that come together to say, you know, we are a community of professionals who are also Black people, and we have communities that need us and need to see us out here engaging with this information and being involved in these studies and things, because it really is important for our communities to see that. And so through along with one of my good friends and I, her name is Dr. Taylor. She's a virologist at Rutgers in New Jersey right now. We founded a nonprofit that's called the Black Microbiologists Association. And like one of our goals and mission as an organization is to really bring together Black microbiologists from across the country, but also the world. We have international members now as well of people who are involved in microbiology at different levels, and so that we can, you know, not be so isolated in our individual institutions or departments or agencies, because there's often only a few or a handful in any given place. But now through this past year, we've been able to like bring ourselves together so that we can hopefully be a louder voice in these issues, so that we can help our communities get connected to the information that they need and get answers to their questions that are valid that they have. So that's really important, and also important for people to know that, like, you know, your tax dollars are what's funding research, and it's really important that as communities we let the NIH and your like representatives know that like you want to see more people that look like you in these positions doing this research in these places, so that we can continue to change the systems and structures that have caused harm in a way that they can benefit everyone and benefit our community. So that's the one piece. And then about the variants, yeah, so the variants are definitely something that we are keeping track of in as time goes on. So, I mean, organisms, viruses, every time, like they're looking for a host to replicate in, because they cannot replicate outside of another organism. And so when they replicate, there's a chance that there's something mutates in their genetic material. Mutations are natural, they occur over time. And so mutations can sometimes lead to different behaviors and different properties of the virus. It's like that's very much what we're seeing happen as the virus circulates throughout the global population. We're seeing these differences come up that may, in some cases or may not in other cases, lead to different characteristics of the disease or the virus and things like that. And so it's really important to keep in mind that, like, although, yes, like things are improving here, like there is a lot of things that we don't know about the individual variants. Thankfully, right now, it looks as if the ones that are the major ones in circulation are not ones that are evading the protection that's offered by the vaccine. So that's something that we are excited about. But there's also things we need to continue the surveillance and keeping track of what's happening as far as viral evolution is concerned here, but also in other countries in the world where like the pandemic is just like, you know, running through other countries at a pace that it is maybe accelerating from what it was here. So it's really important to keep that in mind where, you know, yes, like we do have these like renewed ability to do things in a way that we did before the pandemic, but realize that the pandemic is not over, and like you don't want to be a host for the virus to replicate and then like continue to change, because that's what continues to drive this cycle forward. So it's important to keep that in mind as you make decisions about where you go and what mitigation strategies you're applying.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ari. I'm going to come back to you a little bit later with a question about, because now, you know, of course, we're hearing all of this. And, you know, there are people who are just like, oh, thank God the pandemic is over. And, you know, there's a big part of me that's like, you know, and so I think what you said about being deliberate about how you will mitigate with all this information, I think that's the conversation point, right? Because people are just going to have to make a bunch of choices, and, you know, and they're going to have to be really, really wise choices, because we've not been this way before. And so I want to come back to you and talk to you about kids in a few minutes before we close. But Traylon, you are a young adult leader. Again, you are a game changer in the leadership of Salem. And so when this thing hit, right, you know, you're, you know, in your prime, like, you know, done with school, like, okay, I'm ready to start life. And then a doggone pandemic drops. Then praise the Lord, you know, you have a piece about the vaccine, you know, you reach the conclusion, I'm gonna take it. So now light at the end of the tunnel, and it's summertime, you know, flights are picking back up. The world is opening back up. You are also an entrepreneur, so you got some things that you got cooking. I'm excited about them. But what does return to normal look like for you with everything that's going on in the world? What do you think? What do you imagine that will look like for you? And what are some things you're thinking about and decisions you're making as we begin? I'll put it that way: begin to reemerge from this.
Yeah, so for one, I just want to say, as far as me being in my prime, everything like that, obviously there's a lot of dark to COVID, with the deaths that's happened, with people losing their jobs. I mean, there's a lot of dark stuff. But I think for people in my age range and for the millennials and maybe even younger or older, it also gave us kind of a restart. And especially for me, I just graduated from my master's, got this job, and I finally had time to stop and think about what I was doing. I had time to pace myself and really think about my life. And it's so easy once you graduate college, you're just in the world, you're just getting a job, you're just working for the rest of your life and things like that. And you never really get that break to really make sure you're doing what you want to do or what you can do. And so it did feel like it gave a bit of a pause to our life in a way where we got to reflect on the next steps. For a lot of us, I felt like we thought about the fact that, okay, I don't have to be in that specific area in my life. I can slow it down. I can go travel. I can maybe not even, of course you got your degree, but maybe I want to go try something else other than that. So I definitely feel like it gave us a bit of a pause that might have been needed when you don't think about the dark things that's happened. So I do want to say that. So as far as going back out there, I think that along with a lot of my peers, are going in with a completely different mindset of, now we're kind of ready to get in there, ready to work, ready to do some things because we've had this little bit of a break. And as for me, I definitely found new skills in the pandemic. I found new interests. And so I'm looking forward to actually working with those new interests and those new skills. But just going back to COVID and thinking about the summer and things like that, I do think this conversation is important because, Pastor Sean, I'm going to keep it real with you. I think that the millennials and even Gen Z and things like that, the younger crowd, I do think we are rushing to be out of there. There's the trend of we outside, and that's just everybody so excited and geeked to be traveling. And I was just downtown. I mean, everybody, not me, but everybody had their mask off. So I think this is an important conversation just to remind us that we still need to be cautious. But I think everybody is pretty excited about what's to come after this pandemic, including myself.
So that was so perfect and powerful. That was a whole sermon, and I could never preach that good in 3 minutes.
Stop it.
No, I'm serious, because here's the thing, because we talk about beauty from ashes, right? Even in the midst of the ashes of COVID, you are able to see the beauty of it in a restart. And it makes me think about how anxious and nervous I was. Like, I remember being 25 feeling like, oh my God, I messed up my life. And I'm 41 and I'm like, oh my God, I was 25. I should have stopped and thought and paused and reflected.
Right.
Like, I had a whole lot of runway and I didn't know how much runway I had. Right. So that perspective of seeing this and the beauty of it is God saying, look, just pause, slow down, reflect, see the broader picture of what I may be trying to do with your life. Mm-hmm. So very good. So thank you for that. That was brilliant. And Pastor Watson, you're a pastor. I don't know if you have this going on in your church. All the pastors I've talked to, we're seeing a little bit of this at Salem too. You got some members who are like, oh my God, the pandemic is over, start church again. And then you got some members who are like, Pastor, listen, this is working. I get to watch church and eat my biscuits and drink my coffee. So how are you negotiating with all of this? Again, you as a dad, as a husband, as a father, but also a pastor who's leading so many people. What does recovering normalcy look like for you in your context?
Yeah, so we have at Compassion been quasi open. What I mean by that is we take RSVPs and we have whatever the state's requirement has been. If the state said 50, because I'm overly cautious, I say 35. And the reason we feel comfortable with that is because we've done funerals, just people have still died in this process, and we've had to do funerals, which meant that we really did fine tune a process to move people in, space them, move them out, clean the space properly in a way that I felt comfortable to be able to be under the recommended number. But what I found, Easter was our first time doing that for our church. What I've found is people are not necessarily bursting the doors down to come back. Most people still watch at home, and, different people have flowed in during the RSVP. New people have come as well. But what I've seen is that people have gotten used to eating their biscuits at home watching. And I think that's a reality we're living in. But I think we started this conversation earlier on, and I think it might have been Dr. Ari who said, Dr. Fauci is cool, but I have and I've admired Dr. Fauci in this time. I felt like in the previous presidential situation, he was really the only person who told the truth with, Dr. Birx, who did the best she could. But, I felt like, but even considering what has been said, we're still going to be conservative. And here's why. Last I checked in Chicago, 31 to 32% of Black people have been vaccinated. Of white people, nearly 60% of white Chicagoans have been vaccinated. 30 to 32% of African Americans have been vaccinated, which means that if you have 100 people in the room, you have to, in your mind, use the statistic, the probability that 70% of the people in the room are not vaccinated. And then of that 70, a percentage may even be infected with COVID-19, thus risking the other 70 of being infected. And so, again, I don't see the pandemic as over. I'm very grateful that things are opening up, and Compassion, our team is working even now to figure out two things: how to prepare for a reopening and what that looks like. We're doing things in our church to improve our church, like the building, and we're doing outreaches and things like that to figure out how to engage people and engage our own people and to try to build momentum to get people back into church. We're working on that. We're working on the processes of what it's going to look like. It's going to be vastly different from anything anyone else knew. And I'm just saying, like, leaking this here, I've said this to my church as well. But with that said, we're going to still be conservative until I have reason not to be conservative. And by that, I mean until more Black people are vaccinated, because again, my fear, and maybe I'm just, lack faith, I don't know. But my fear again is that it will be May, June, July, August, and they'll start talking about COVID cases less and less and less, because we only make up 12% of the population, less and less and less. And we are still going to be packing the hospitals in Chicago because we still sitting here believing our cousins at barbershops who barely got an associate's degree. And I'm not dissing anyone who's a barber. I'm not trying to do that. But, so for us, we're going to play the conservative end. So even though our church building, they say that we have the ability to be 25% capacity, I'm not aiming nowhere near 25% capacity. I've increased my number, my 50, and a little bit, but we're just, I have to be able to sleep at night, and I cannot. I don't think I have what it takes to sit across the table from someone's grandchild or someone's child and have to explain to them why actions I made, decisions I made, how that could have possibly contributed to their loved one's demise. I just can't do it. So yeah, so we're planning all of that. But on the positive side, we are, we don't know. We're hoping for something soon, where there are more people can be in the room. But, you know, what I'm seeing in my church and what I've heard from other places is people just ain't busting the doors down, because you have two types of people. You have people who are still nervous, and then you have people who, again, have become complacent. Some haven't even logged on to church in a while. They log on maybe once a month. Then there's some who just love being able to sit at their dinner table or the breakfast table and watch service. And so we're going to have to do things to motivate people to come back to church. And so my team has a meeting this Sunday after church, because I have to figure out a way to pastor and lead and stuff like that while also doing virtual learning. We're going to be trying to figure out and plan more. We got some things on the table now, but plan even more to try to get people back into the habit of church again. So, yeah.
Such wisdom, man. I really appreciate the balance and the awareness in all of that, right? So we still got to be the church, but we have to be responsible for the souls that the Lord has entrusted to us, and just be good stewards of, you know, all of that. And so there's a lot to think about. So thank you for that perspective. Dr. Ari, you got the last word. I'm always ask you a question, but then you can say whatever you want to say, because you're the only Black microbiologist. So I'm gonna ask you this question. You take this question wherever you want to go with it, and then we'll be done. But so we got vaccines for kids. We're talking about younger kids being vaccinated in the fall, and everybody that I've heard, you know, is hearing that their schools are going to be back to normal. Right. I think, what did I hear? Traylon, is that right? I think Watson CPS, all normal classroom planning by the fall.
I heard that they may be looking that way.
Yeah. So, and other school districts are, you know, thinking in that same vein. So just a word you would share to parents of kids as the vaccine becomes available to younger groups.
Yep.
There you go.
Got it. So being a mom of a young child myself, who is much younger than 12, this has been very front of mind for me. My family made some adjustments to our plans for him as far as school was concerned over the last year, because I was really trying to do the best that I could to discern where the risks would be higher versus lower, and what we can modify to mitigate those risks. So I am very concerned by what I am seeing and the kind of conversations that I'm hearing around what school may look like in the fall. And I've also noticed from talking to others in different areas that it really seems to be very regional, maybe even some within clusters of school districts, we can have wildly different responses to the new information that we're getting. I'm aware of some districts who are, there are people pushing for the pandemic's over now. We don't want our kids to have to wear masks in the classrooms anymore. What we are just gonna move on like normal. And that kind of thing is concerning, because the fact remains that people are still getting sick, and people are still in the hospital, and there are really real risks here. As of earlier this month, there were more than 3 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 in children. And those kind of cases in children have been increasing in the past, in recent weeks. So it's really unfortunate that the narrative has kind of been, oh, children aren't really affected. We don't need to really worry about them. This is really for adults or people that are old or high risk. A lot of that is not, it's just not based in true information. And so it's really important, as to all the parents and even people who have kids in their lives, that if you are kid adjacent, be aware that this is a very real thing for them. We also know that there's the multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children. It's abbreviated MIS-C, where children who may or may not have actually had COVID but were exposed to COVID, they have a very late after the fact hyperimmune response. So they have rashes, or they might be having heart palpitations, very concerning things that require hospitalization and care. That's something that's also been happening in children, and that is a concern that has been a concern of mine since the early reports of that happening. And so I've been I'm kind of like tracking with how that's going. So there's a lot of things that we don't know about what's going on physiologically when that's happening, and how do we know like what kid is going to develop that syndrome, what kid's not going to develop that syndrome, if they're exposed or not. And we know that children do transmit COVID-19. A lot of times it could be they're asymptomatic. They don't have symptoms at all. And so these are just truths that we have to hold and figure out how to make the best decisions with that information. And so I'm very, I want to encourage parents and those who are child adjacent to be really more involved in the community as far as like what the plans will be for your child's education. Who is on the school board? Have you talked to the school board? Try to gather information, make sure they are following good data. And I mean, I guess we could have a whole other conversation about where to find good information and make sure that the data that's being used in these conversations is one that should be informing the policies that are happening. But the CDC did come out a couple days after their new mask guidelines for relaxing masking for vaccinated people. They did follow up and say, oh, but in schools, we should still be wearing masks in schools. And unfortunately, I don't think that update had as big of an impact on the news or like the national narrative as it should have been, because the fact remains that children are still vulnerable. We need to keep them out of the hospital. We need to be doing our best to protect them. And one of the ways that we know how to best do that is masking. And so if you are able to have any part of conversations or seat at the table around what's going on in schools and in classrooms, I would encourage people to be aware, as now is the time those decisions are probably starting to be made. People are starting to have discussions about what the community wants. And like, so, I mean, try to be involved in some level of like letting someone know like, hey, like the kids should still have masks on at school in the fall. We cannot just pretend like everything is over, because it's very much not over. And what I'm so hopeful that we are able to avoid is a situation where we have a fall where a lot of adults are vaccinated, but a lot of children are unvaccinated. And they're there with other kids with differing levels of mitigation strategies. We don't know what's going on in their homes. We don't know if their family members are vaccinated. There's just like a lot of unknowns that we're going to have together in schools in the fall. And so I just really would encourage people to be really involved in those conversations among your school communities and your school leaders and things like that, because it really is important for us going into fall to do so with good information and realizing the pandemic is not over. The children are still at risk. There's a lot of things that we don't know. And so it's really important to be wise about the decisions that we're making.
3 million children, Jesus. I had not heard that. That's just wild.
And I mean, I do want to jump in and say, I mean, of course, those are cases. The number of deaths are lower, but it's still like we also know that there's other complications, things that are happening. There are kids who have pre-existing other immunocompromised conditions. There's so many other things we need to like hold also and realize that we can't just be like, okay, we're done. I've suffered enough. It's been a year, and so we're gonna be done with that, because that's very much not where we are.
Yeah, and those are 3 million kids that are passing it off to people who are vulnerable as well, and for other reasons. And so much, but it's information and insight that gives us hope, right? So we know how to respond, we know how to prepare, we know what to do. Dr. Ari, thank you so much for being in the space for us. We can't say that enough. Thank you. Really appreciate your representation. I do hope that people check out Black in Microbiology. If you're a young person and you're trying to figure out, okay, I have interests in the science or medical field, and I want to learn more about what it's like to become a Dr. Ari, check them out, connect with her, because we need more of us. We need more of us in that space. Traylon, thank you so much. Thank you for agreeing to be on this side of the camera. You brought so many important perspectives to this conversation. I so appreciate you and all the work that you do. Pastor Watson Jones, thank God for you. My brother, for your faithfulness, your shepherding, your wise perspectives. Man, this has been such an incredible conversation with 3 incredible young adult leaders. And Salem, I want to thank you for tuning in tonight. For connecting to this. Listen, this is something that you want to go back over. This is something that you want to rewatch. This is something that you want to make sure that you continue to tag and share. There was a lot of insight, a lot of authenticity, a lot of wisdom that was shared that can help us to move forward in healthy and hopeful ways. We'll be right back here next Sunday night for another episode of the Family Hour. But until then, we'll see you Wednesday night, 7 o'clock for Bible class, and also next Sunday morning for worship. Father, thank you for this great conversation. Thank you, Lord, that it is wisdom, your word says, is the principal thing. In all of our getting, get understanding. Thank you for the understanding that was shared. Thank you, Lord God, that when we have wisdom, when we have understanding, the Bible also talks about wisdom guarding us and protecting us like a mother watches over her children. Thank you for the wisdom that you've poured out to us tonight through Traylon and through Pastor Watson and through Dr. Ari. God, may we hold this wisdom in such a way that we make better decisions to honor you, to glorify you, to love ourselves and love our neighbor. Love you, God, praise you. Thank you for your faithfulness, your goodness, and your mercy toward us. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. We'll see you next week for another Family Hour. Have a great week until